referrals from therapists throughout the country.
It says that she remembers and can cry. I guess the thing that's most compelling to me as a clinician is to hear reports from a variety of patients who do not have contact with each other, who report very similar stories, and stories which are shocking and alarming about murder and sacrifice of human beings, cannibalism, sexual promiscuity, in what appears to be a very ritualized, planned setting, using not only children, both boys and girls, but adults as well. We also hear similarities in reporting of being buried alive and then being unearthed and told that they've been reborn in the name of Satan. We have stories of people being married to Satan in marriage ceremonies. There are repeated reports of serial sexual assaults with the impregnation of a young adolescent and the destruction of that child, often by the mother itself, in the name of Satan. More recently, we're beginning to hear more specific techniques of indoctrination and torture. Torture is very frequently used to one, strengthen the individual to maintain secrecy within the cult, that is intimidation. It's also considered something to be desired by cult, that is the toleration of pain, the mixing of pain and sexual experiences and blurring the boundaries between them. But it's, quote, to make a good soldier for Satan.
What we're dealing with at this point, in my belief anyway, is a well-organized religious and cult-based group that is widespread.
Myra Riddell is a private therapist and the driving force behind the Ritual Abuse Task Force of the Los Angeles County Women's Commission. Experts like Riddell are convinced Satanists can be found at every level of society. They are also convinced that the number of practicing Satanists is growing. According to Riddell, it's hard to get accurate information on satanic cults because they exert almost total control over their members and their young victims.
There are several purposes to this kind of control. One, it permits the rituals to go on with the complete cooperation of the individual who is being sacrificed in whatever way, whether it's being killed or burned or sexually used for the ritual purposes. And the other is one that concerns many of us a great deal, and that is that these kids who are being this brainwashed are being inculcated into a belief in Satanism on a very basic unconscious level. We in fact, and they in fact, are trying to raise a whole generation of Satanists.
In the past, satanic cults have maintained their membership by raising their own children within the cult. Now experts see an alarming new trend. Survivors say that satanic groups are establishing preschools and daycare centers for the sole purpose of recruiting vast numbers of small children.
We are hearing from those survivors that there is a deliberate and concerted and well-organized, well-orchestrated effort to infiltrate the preschool system.
And here's the spy shark.
Psychologist Catherine Gould is known nationally for her work in treating ritually abused children. She's deeply disturbed that Satanists are preying on children at such an early age.
The purpose is to achieve an indoctrination at an early formative age when a child is going to be most susceptible to being emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually hooked to the cult and hooked for life. The idea is that you get the child under the age of 6, you abuse them, you indoctrinate them, you use them for cult purposes, you break them down, you strip them of any sense of free will, you strip them of any sense of connectedness to family or to the positive parts of society, and you have somebody who functions for the purposes of the cult. And the idea there, of course, is that the cult can call upon that person later in life.
Doreen Kenny is one parent who suspects that her daughter was the victim of satanic abuse at a preschool in Southern California.
She had stomach aches, she had headaches, she would complain about various limbs hurting her, screaming with pain, just absolutely screaming with pain. Night terrors, just horrible, horrible night terrors. She regressed from a 3-year-old to a 2-year-old, and she was back in diapers. Finally, one day after being in school about 6 months, a little over 6 months, she had told my oldest daughter she was poked. And once that came out, I knew, because of all the things that had been going on, I just knew in my heart that she had been molested.
At first, Kenny assumed her daughter was the victim of sexual abuse, and she placed the little girl in therapy. Over many months, however, the real story began to unfold. Kenny discovered that her daughter had been subjected to various forms of sexual and ritualistic abuse that paralleled activities common to satanic cults. 6 years later, her daughter is still haunted by fear.
The most frightening stuff that is still with her is she believes she's being watched. Every red car and black car that goes by is watching her. Every lady that dresses in blue are kidnappers. They will kidnap kids. These are things that she's been told. She has at one point, and as she continues in therapy, gets better and better, but at one point believed very much so that she was a child of Satan and that she actually had Satan's heart put into her. She still has trouble with that when you get palpitations, that her heart's going to explode, that because she's told.
Dr. Roland Summit is a psychiatrist who treats child ritual abuse victims at Harbor UCLA Medical Center. He says many satanic cults use intimidation, fear, and even drugs to make children keep quiet.
Children report being given drugs which makes them feel sleepy, makes them forget. They're told they're going to have an operation. When they regain consciousness, they have what looks like a scar which disappears, a kind of scratch on their skin, and they're told that something has been implanted inside of them. It may be a bomb, it may be the part of an animal that's been killed, and that will know if they're thinking about telling, and it will become armed and it will destroy them. So when children think about telling, and when they get nervous, there's a throbbing in their head, which they interpret as the bomb ready to go off, or a churning in their stomach, which may be the dog chewing at them. And from a child's point of view, they are now booby-trapped against telling.
It seems that Satanists will use all sorts of elaborate and insidious schemes to keep their young victims under control. Consider the case of Ed Gallup, a Protestant minister, his wife Mary Lou, and their son Chip. All three were convicted of sexually abusing children at the 2 preschools they operated in Roseburg, Oregon. The children told stories of ritualistic animal killings and sexual abuse with carrots, bottles, and sticks. Judge William Laswell, who prosecuted the Gallups when he was a district attorney, says the family intimidated their young victims by saying they had magic glasses capable of seeing into the children's homes.
Chip, the youngest of the Gallups, had a pair of magic glasses, which is simply an oversized set of sunglasses you would buy at a carnival. The mother had a set too, and the father. And the children told us that Chip Gallup would get up on the stage, put the glasses on, turn in the direction of where the child lived, and then make some observation about whether the child finished breakfast, put away his pajamas, left some tracks on the carpet. What would have happened is that Chip would have called the family and learned something about what happened that morning. And so when Chip told them that he could see into their home and tell them something that they knew had happened, they believed that he in fact could see them and hear them wherever they were. And he had threatened to kill their parents and harm them if they talked. In addition, he'd given them, most of them, a photograph of himself, which he asked to have displayed in their bedroom so that he was always looking at them that way too.
Crimes committed in the name of Satan are beginning to receive special attention by police officials. Several departments have established occult crime units and are learning to spot the evidence of satanic activity. A number of investigators are working to uncover the links between survivor stories and existing cults. Others are looking into the possibility of a national or international conspiracy involving satanic groups. There's much to be learned, and law enforcement officials are just beginning to scratch the surface. But across the country, police investigators agree a disturbing trend is emerging. The most vicious crimes being committed in the name of Satan are being perpetrated by young people in their teens. Pete Rowland and 2 other members of his satanic cult clubbed a 4th boy to death in the woods of rural Missouri. The group had been practicing satanic rites for years, torturing so many animals to death they lost count of the number. They were obsessed with satanic books, gory movies, and heavy metal music. After the brutal murder, Rowland said songs by the rock group Metallica drove him and his friends into a frenzy as they planned the attack. Eddie Krigler, an Arkansas youth, claimed he was acting under direct orders from Satan when he beat his parents with a 5-foot club, then stabbed them repeatedly with the same butcher knives he used to perform satanic rites. At the time of the attack, Krigler was recruiting other teenagers to form a satanic cult. In New Jersey, 14-year-old Tommy Sullivan stabbed his mother a dozen times with his Boy Scout knife. After that, Sullivan slit his own throat. Just weeks before the attack, he told a friend that Satan appeared to him in a vision, ordering him to kill his family. For Ricky Casso, involvement in Satanism led to murder and suicide. Casso and his friends formed a cult called Knights of the Black Circle. One night they turned on another teen, Gary Lowers, forced him to say, "I love Satan," and gouged out his eyes before stabbing him to death. The day after he was arraigned, Casso hanged himself with a bedsheet.
Satanism is on the rise, and it is the crime of the 90s.
Randy Eman is a police officer who spends much of his time investigating crimes that have links to the occult. Eman believes the lure of Satanism is too powerful for many young people to resist.
The danger of Satanism and the occult to society I liken to a narcotic. It's addictive. It's power they're seeking. And when they find out that they toyed with a ritual and that ritual worked, they're hooked. It's just like the hook in the side of their mouth as a fish. It takes them one step further, and pretty soon the hook is not on the side of the mouth. They have swallowed it completely. And it is a magnet, and it is a magnet that they can't go away from. It just draws them further and further and further. And pretty soon, they're not going with just lightweight rituals. They're graduating from candle rituals to wearing the costumes, the regalia with the ritual swords. They're going to the black hoods, the animal sacrifices, and where may that take them? To human sacrifice.
Human sacrifice. That's how far Sean Sellers went. Today, Sean is in solitary confinement on death row at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. Sean was just 15 years old when he was tried, convicted, and sentenced to death for 3 cold-blooded murders, including that of his mother and stepfather. Murders he committed in the name of Satan.
I was mad at my parents. I was doing destruction rituals, saying, "Satan, kill him, get him out of my life." I tried to move out. They came and got me, wouldn't let me move out. And it just built up to the point to where I did it. I had this dream over and over again that I'd kill my parents, that I'd sacrifice them to Satan in my dream. And like I said this before, I woke up and it wasn't a dream. It was reality. It really happened.
The murders took place in this house, in a well-kept Oklahoma City suburb where Sean and his parents lived. On the night of March 6, 1986, dressed in black underwear and a black hooded cape, Sean tiptoed into his parents' bedroom as they slept, pulled out a .44 Magnum revolver, and shot them both in the head. Later, he went back to their room, looked at the dead bodies, and laughed. What could have driven a young man to such violence? On the outside, they looked like a happy family, but the real story was different. From early childhood on, Sean was shuttled from relative to relative, or left with babysitters. At 10, one of those sitters introduced him to Satanism, and Sean was hooked. By the time he was in high school, Satanism dominated his life. He formed a satanic coven with a group of his friends. He kept a satanic diary and illustrated it with satanic symbols. He built an altar in his bedroom where he performed secret ceremonies. He wrote incantations to Satan, sometimes in his own blood. And he drank his blood regularly.
I began to drink blood because it gave me a rush. It gave me a thrill. It was like, wow, I'm drinking blood, And then